Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the Future of Education. It is the 7th of March. It's Wednesday, and this is the Future of Education, and our special show tonight is a panel discussion, a panel and a community discussion on Seth Godin's new book, Stop Stealing Dreams. We're delighted to have a really fun panel here. Lisa Nielsen deserves a shout out and some clapping. I'm hovering over the smiley face, going down to the applause, and applauding for Lisa. Lisa really pulled this all together and brought our guests here: Lisa Cooley, Pat Ferenga, Nikhil Goyal, Lisa Nalbone, and Lisa Nielsen. And you'll have noticed that there are 3 Lisas, so we'll do our best to keep them organized tonight. Future of Education is sponsored by my Web 2.0 Labs project, and we express our appreciation to Blackboard Collaborate for providing this service in the room. Coming up at the Q and ISTE shows are our 5th anniversary Unplugged events. These are all of the unconferencey social media activities that surround both of these conferences. Really a lot of fun. I finished up the Q website today, an all-day unconference on Thursday, as well as live stream sessions for anybody who's ever wanted to present and never been accepted or has something new to say. Go to ISTE Unplugged or Q Unplugged. We really look forward to seeing you at those events. They are a blast. This is the 5th anniversary as well of Classroom 2.0. A couple of fun projects. One is called Ed Incubator, helping currently PBS NewsHour develop a teacher advisory panel. As well, we are taking submissions for Classroom 2.0, the book. Everybody will get published. We're publishing online, and then we'll also have a printed version. Not everybody will get in the printed version, but it's a highly inclusive project, and we really encourage you to submit. Coming up, some great conferences this year, worldwide free virtual conferences. Announcing for the first time tonight the Social Learning Summit, which is going to be Saturday, April 21st, in conjunction with Discovery Education. We're going to tie this into the book project, but we're really looking for all of you to contribute, to join, and to present at the Social Learning Summit. Again, a highly inclusive event. We want you to present. The audience will get to choose to whom they listen, but we sure want to give you the chance to tell your story. And then we are arranging dates for a Gaming and Education Conference, as well as the Alternate Education Conference, which Lisa and I are working on, and is sadly behind, but it will come. We do have dates for the Future of Libraries Conference, Library 2.012, October 3rd through the 5th, and the Global Education Conference will be November 12th to 16th. Anyway, these are really a blast. Thousands of people from all over the world gathering together. You will have a lot of fun. Coming up on the Future of Education on March 12th, we're going to have a conversation with Mimi Ito, which should be a lot of fun. Kathy Davidson on the 20th, David Warlick on the 22nd. Alec Koros is going to talk about social learning on the 27th. Dick Gale is going to talk about appreciative inquiry and positive deviance. Howard Rheingold on his new book. You can see lots of fun coming up there, hopefully something that's of interest to you. We're scheduled out into July, which is just phenomenal. It also means that I'm stressing about busyness levels and not getting guests on as early as I would like, but it's a good problem to have. If you've missed any of our shows, they are all recorded in full, Collaborate versions in MP3 form. David Weinberger talked about his new book, Too Big to Know. Incredible read, well worth looking at. Seth talks about it, or references it in Stop Stealing Dreams. Dennis Litke talked about Big Picture Schools, which I wish had been mentioned in Stop Stealing Dreams, but really well worth a listen. Kind of a life-changing interview for me. Alan Blankstein talked about the answer being in the room, and just a brilliant look at how communities of education are created at a local level, and much, much more. Lorette Lynn, the Unplugged Mom. Anyway, over 250 shows, hopefully something worth listening to. So this is going to be your chance now to let us know where you're participating from. Look to the left of the map. You should see some icons now. You're looking for the second one down, the sun or the star. You click on that and you click again, and then you click on the map. I'm in Austin, Texas at the South by Southwest EDU conference, and feel free to shout out where you're participating from. Time, temperature. We had a little bit of rain today in Austin. Oh, thank goodness for New Zealand. This was feeling like a very North America-centric show tonight. A huge welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to keep posting in the chat there. I'm going to move us on. And if you're listening to the recording, thanks so much for taking the time to do so. So this is really a fun event. Lisa, again, I'm going to start with you because you really kind of pulled this together, and I want to give you a chance to talk about the resources that you've prepared that allow for discussion around this book. So why don't you take the mic? I'll try and follow along on a little bit of a web tour and tell us where conversations are taking place and what you've done.
Okay, thanks so much. So I'm interested to see this web tour. I did a few things when I saw that Seth's Ed Reform Manifesto was written. I kind of saw it happening all over the different learning network areas I'm in, like Twitter and Facebook and whatnot. Oh, that's funny. Somehow something interesting is popping up on my screen.
I can't do Facebook because I forgot it requires a login. So I've put the link in the chat, but there is a Facebook group, and you can talk about that if you'd like.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'll start with the Facebook group. What I did when I started reading the book is I set up, in the very beginning introduction, Seth says that the whole point of the book is to promote discussion. So I set up a group in Facebook called, well, first I looked to see if there was a group in Facebook called Stop Stealing Dreams, and there wasn't. So I set a group up. I tweeted that out and asked people to join. And then I also set up a Google Doc for conversation about the book, and that Google document is set up in all 132 sections of the book. And I think it was really brilliant the way Seth set that book up, because you can talk about all these different conversations. So as I went through those 132 sections, I found, and there's probably more than this, but I found, I think, about 4 major themes popping out, which were homeschooling, what can school boards do, the importance of youth voice in the ed reform conversation, and within that, I saw 2 different areas, which were higher ed and K-12. So the next thing I did was I also began conversations in groups that hit all of those audiences. So I began a conversation in his homeschooling section in several homeschooling groups. And then I began a conversation in a school board member group about what he was saying about school board members. I began, and that school board member group is called the Radical School Board Members or something. Lisa Cooley could put the exact one in there, the exact name, that's her group. And I also started a conversation in the Student Union, which is a group headed by Doris Vitek, where students who are interested in ed reform discuss things. And I also started a conversation in Uncollege. And so in each of those places, really robust conversations were going on. And then I put a column in that Google Doc that I set up that has links to all the places that conversations are happening if people want to go ahead and participate in those various conversations. In addition to that, I used Twitter to kind of talk about what was going on. So that was the strategy that I took. We had some amazing conversations. One of those turned into a blog post by Pat Ferenga. And what was really cool about that is Seth Godin replied to that and commented as well. So we did, I think, achieve the goal of getting some conversations started, and I'm really excited to bring together people that represent all those areas and hear everyone's thoughts about the book. So thank you so much, Steve.
Lisa, anyway, you're really the organizer of this show, so special appreciation to you. Okay, so I thought it would make sense to start out. We are limited in time. Clearly, what we're doing is starting conversations that can be continued in these other places, but hopefully we're able to touch on some things of importance. And I wanted to make sure that each of you as panelists had a chance to kind of tell us your response to the book as a whole, and then to maybe call out something that was a point you either really agreed with or really disagreed with to kind of begin the conversation. And most of you are not going to be familiar with each other or the audience. So Lisa Cooley, let's start with you. Can you give a one sentence bio background on yourself, and then tell us how you responded to the book? And would you rewrite it, or would you hand it out to people? And Lisa, you need to turn your mic on.
There we go. Great. Okay. I'm a school board member from Central Maine, very, very rural area. I'm actually originally from New York City, came up here, and a very low income area. And I came on the school board about 8 years ago, and just spent some time really trying to see how we can make changes in how we do school. So it gradually took over my life more and more over the past 8 years. And in terms of the book, I sometimes people say things about education in a way that imposes great clarity on what you're already thinking. And to me, that's what the book did, and that's why it needs to get out there and get passed around and get discussed, because he's able to say things that we may be thinking or we may be saying, but he's saying it a lot, just imposing this great clarity that lets the discussion move forward by leaps. So that was my thought about my first read of the book.
Okay, so go ahead and turn your mic off when you're done. Actually, that's probably a pretty good way to start, the bio and the brief overview. And then let's do that and go through, and then we'll come back and ask you to call out one point of great confluence or of disagreement. So next, let's do Pat. Pat, would you turn your mic on and let us know about yourself and then your overall view?
I worked with the late John Holt in 1981, and when he passed away in 1985, he left the company to me and a board of directors that I continued publishing the magazine Growing Without Schooling that he started in 1977 until 2001. And I studied with, or I guess you could say, conversed with Levi Illich many times, and many of the school reformers from the 60s like George Dennison and Jim Herndon, who I met through John. So I have a strong background in alternative education and homeschooling and unschooling in particular. I'm also the author of a book, Teacher Owned, the John Holt Book of Homeschooling. What I liked about Seth's manifesto was his descriptions of the disconnect between jobs and education, his description of college and how he was emphasizing going through it in different scopes and sequences, and also how so much of it is irrelevant today. He's excellent at connecting and describing American cultural and business history, and I really appreciate his support for a movement that communicates and encourages passion. But I have to say, as someone who's been in the field a while, none of his ideas or observations about the nature and purpose of school are new. It's not like these haven't been proposed to the masses before, let alone to schools. For instance, he writes, learning is not done to you, learning is something you choose to do, make school different, and so on. Now, of course, I support and agree with both, but so would most school reformers for like the last 100 years.
Did it bother you that Seth didn't spend a little bit more time acknowledging and recognizing that, or do you think that he's just lending his voice to the conversation?
That's today I learned something very interesting about the manifesto, and that's that it's actually part of this domino project that he's doing with Amazon. So when I read, again, because I came into this, it was a leisurely comment I made on a Sunday morning in Lisa's discussion group that prompted this. But how can I put this? My take is that this piece was written both as a manufactured piece to generate conversation for Godin and Amazon's domino marketing study, as well as a sincere plea for a serious conversation about changing education. But when I realized this today, it really did change my feelings about it. I felt a bit manipulated. My passion for teaching and learning is being exploited, unknown to me, as a marketing study. I want to say that I'm not very upset about this, though, because Godin's thesis was driven home to me. This comment that I made about his manifesto that I dashed off one leisurely Sunday morning has gotten more attention than many things I spent days working on.
It does seem like there's an interesting dynamic taking place here. You know, in part, Seth's voice is large, and so his joining the conversation is really valuable. At the same time, there are questions about whether or not the goal of having everybody accept this narrative is realistic, or if this more thoughtful narrative is always necessarily going to be the secondary narrative and may be more useful seen as a secondary narrative. Let's come back to that and get your thoughts on it. But next, why don't we go to Nikhil? And Nikhil, I don't know how your connection is, but you're either on the phone or you're going to use the mic here. Short bio of yourself and your overall perception of the book.
Okay, I'm on the phone.
You sound fine.
All right, my name is, okay, great. My name is Nikhil Glow. Thank you for having me. I'm a student at Syosset High School in Long Island, and I'm interested in education because I'm writing a book on how we can revolutionize the way we educate our kids, and I'm offering a unique student perspective on the issue. I really enjoyed Seth's book. I mean, it's a really great way to mainstream what a lot of reformers are trying to say. I especially liked his ideas on how we need to change this factory model of education. But the things where I see a little bit of a pitfall is, of course, he didn't mention a lot of the education reformers like that are currently trying to bring about change today. And of course, he has this little of a marketing sort of side to it. But I think it's a really great way for people who are not necessarily in education and paying attention to exactly what's going on to really understand what's at stake and how they can play a close role, especially for parents that are at the center of this. And I've talked to a lot of students about this, and they really enjoyed many of the struggles he emphasizes in the book, and how they can relate to many ideas.
Thanks, Nikhil. That's terrific. Both Nikhil and Pat, and even Lisa, if there are links that you would like to put into other content or material that you want to make sure that people are aware of, I think that would be valuable. Pat, I'm especially thinking of you in terms of your work. Good to have it recorded. So let's move on to Lisa Nalbone. So Lisa, go ahead and take the mic and tell us about yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me today. My current claim to fame is that I am Dale's mom. Dale Stevens is the leader of Uncollege, the Uncollege movement. I was a public school teacher, and I've been interested in education reform and libraries and community work for a long time. I thought that I agree with you. I think that a lot of the ideas are not necessarily new, but I think it's a good format for starting lots of conversations and maybe more approachable to for some people who might not be thinking about these topics yet. And then I think one of the themes overall that I was, I think that his, even though he called for reform, a lot of his ideas were still very top-down. And I think that of course, we went from public school to unschooling, and then I have a child who dropped out of college to start the Uncollege movement. So we've moved in a more radical direction of really thinking, and I really think that encouraging students to lead their, to be confident enough to reach out and do something about their own education is important. And it seems to me that even though he talks about addressing fears, in some ways there's still an overall fearfulness about letting, just with my sense was that his fear of was that line about every parent being a failed teacher, or not, he didn't say it that way, but anyway, I do think it's great for generating a lot of conversation.
Thanks, Lisa. I had the similar reaction to the homeschool section, and especially as a parent. But to Seth's credit, I feel as though he's invited criticism, and so I think it's fair to kind of drill down on that. And I appreciate the fact that he's sort of been open to that. Okay, so Lisa Nielsen, we're back to you. Why don't you do? We didn't have you do your bio before, but let's have you do that and maybe an overall reaction.
Okay. So I'm the author of Teaching Generation Text and creator and author of the Innovative Educator blog, and I am a educational administrator in New York City, and I love writing and speaking about ways to really empower our children to learn in the best ways possible. My reaction to the book is this may have happened before, but I've never seen a book formatted this way, and I thought it was just a fabulous format to invite dialogue. I think we're finally in an age where conversations about books can happen more easily on an international scale than in the past, so I think it's great timing for a book like this, and it really got my own thoughts flowing about what can be done. Something I would have appreciated, but perhaps this isn't where Seth wanted to go, was if he had put in some structures in place for discussion and even some structures where people could discuss with him and have him as part of the conversation. And like you, I also appreciated the fact that he invited disagreement and expected that to happen. So I think that was really great. Like many of the people who gave feedback already, there were several points that he made that I agree with, such as, how school is working, and that it's preparing students for the industrial age, and in many cases, especially K-12, we're ignoring the fact that there's access to information, and we don't need teachers to perform the same roles that we've always needed them to perform. Some of the areas that I disagreed with him on is I still don't feel that he trusts children's desire to learn and follow their passions in the way that I've seen that exist with young people who were given that freedom. And I mean young people that are participating in an unschooling like living, or in more of a freer democratic school type environment or big picture school. I agree with you 100%. It would have been much cooler in my mind to have him refer to, or at least to add, models like big picture, Sudbury, Nuestra Escuela, or any of those other amazing models, Reggio Emilia, that are quite different than what we're seeing in the mainstream traditional school environment today. But again, he was inviting conversation, and the things that we write about in this book will get more attention. So I think it's a great opportunity to bring attention to the issues that we're passionate about. So that pretty much wraps up my thoughts.
Thanks, Lisa. So one thing Lisa and I have talked about is I have the domain bookdiscussions.com, and we were thinking that we might create a Ning network that allowed for threaded conversation on each of the sections. So I'd be interested in the chat to get your response to that, if you feel like it would be one more distraction or if it would actually add and help the larger conversation. I'm going to add my 2 cents here. My overall response to the book was much like Pat's. I kind of wish there had been some reaching out to people who had been doing this for a long time. At the same time, I'm sort of deeply immersed in watching a kind of a corporate takeover of a lot of the educational technology reform movement, and I felt like the book did a really nice job of balancing that messaging. And I also felt like Seth did a really good job of describing the interplay between corporate interests and the school without resorting to kind of conspiracy theory. And John, when we get back to you, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that. So now let's swing around one more time, and starting with Lisa Cooley. What's one part of the book that you sort of passionately agreed with or disagreed with that we could have a short conversation on? And again, I'm thinking here of about maybe a 5-minute conversation with the community who are listening as well. What's one thing you'd like to draw out of the book that we could talk about?
Well, the thing that jumped out that was something that I think about all the time and don't really know how to address it adequately enough is when he says, and I'm looking at it, I can't think of anything more cynical and selfish, though, than telling kids who didn't win the parent lottery that they've lost the entire game. I have a lot of people in my community say, why should we spend all this money on education for the kind of education that kids should be getting from their parents at home? If the parents aren't doing it, why should we pay for it? And it's frustrating because there's just really no way of answering that, because we're a community, because our community benefits from education, and it's just like, why do we give kids free breakfast? Because they're hungry. So that's something that I can actually use when people say to me, why should we spend all this money? Why should we treat our schools as places where kids need to be taught things that they should have been taught at home? And we get a lot of that around here because it's a pretty low income area. There's a lot of poverty. There's some drugs. There's some real problems. And in the rural area, you have the isolation in addition to poverty. So that there's a lot of social difficulties here, and people don't want to have to pay for what they regard as somebody else's problem. So that's one thing that was really helpful to me. Just in terms of thinking about my own community.
Can I springboard off of that, Lisa? So I'm interested in this question of how hard it is to make change. And what I heard in that same quote that you've just read, and I think Seth also says something like, how dare we tell people they aren't talented enough, were the seeds of a larger narrative that could almost be like a civil rights movement. Do we need that level of cultural agreement and that kind of a large-scale movement to change the school system? And if we do, could that be the basis of it, the inherent worth of every child? This idea that no child should be told they're defective. Lisa, would that work in your community? And you're going to have to turn your mic back on.
Okay, sorry, got it. It's the kind of thing that I try to talk about all the time. One book that I was very excited about over the last couple of years has been The Talent Code, because it shows the neurological reason why we are all born with an equal ability to grow intelligence, and I believe in that. But you have to understand something about being on a school board. You could be thinking as clearly as possible, but you sit down at the school board table and what you feel like is you're in a labyrinth. You don't know whether to turn right or left in order to get where you want to go. My partner, my colleague on the school board, and I see very clearly how we want to make change. And then we sit at the school board table and everything really changes. And you're faced with a bunch of others we are all amateurs at education, and the administrators are the professionals. And all of a sudden, clarity for us kind of disappears as we sort of face with the obstacles of being trying to influence a large public institution. So we know what we want. We want every child to be treated as a learner and to be given the freedom to become a learner. And it's very difficult for us to say, well, the changes that you're planning are okay, but they're not good enough. And we get told that we're moving too fast and things need to move slowly. And I think that we're moving too slowly because kids are growing up, and we have to make these changes as quickly as possible because kids are growing up and they're gone, and we have a great school-to-prison pipeline here in Waldo County, Maine. So it's just really hard to know how to manipulate a big institution, and if anybody knows how to do that, shoot me an email.
So, Pat, I really want to go to you here because you've watched this for a long time, and you've probably thought about it for much more time than many of us. what would it take to change the larger narrative? Is it even possible to do so? And are there things about this moment in time that might make that easier?
Well, I really feel that we keep waiting for Superman, as the movie says, or the one idea, the one answer, the silver bullet that's going to solve all the problems of schools and education. And what I've learned over the years is that it's really it's a lot of answers. We have there's got to be many different ways, and I am amazed at how school stops that dream. I feel Lisa's frustration, because I've heard this time and time again of how hard it is to make schools change. And of course, that's why John Holt came out in favor of homeschooling. I mean, I believe he wrote this, but he certainly said it many times. He got tired of batting his head, going up to the plate and striking out throughout the 60s and 70s. He said, I want to do something that's going to change, the way kids learn in our society. And he felt that he got on base with homeschooling. Now, it's not an answer for everyone, and we've talked about that. But then, how do we apply, pressure to an institution that, well, for instance, they won't listen to a lot of us because we're either students or parents, or we don't have PhDs in education. And then, and it seems like we're just excluded from having this participation just by the nature of, Lisa said it, that the administrators just have a different take on it. So I'm not that optimistic about change within the system, although I'm very optimistic about people's resilience, people's abilities to find loopholes and work around the system. And there's many different avenues that we can take to help children learn. And I would like to talk more about that, when I come up about my issues with the book. I'll stop now.
No, well, let's do that now, because we're going to run out of time fast. So this is as good a time as any. I've put the John Holt website up, and I'll put your personal website up. And why don't you just launch into what you want to talk about?
All right, thank you, Steve. Essentially, I think Godin does not go far enough in pushing the envelope of what it means to change our vision of education and what types of institutions we might need to support that vision going forward. He doesn't strongly consider that you can learn in places that are not school-like. The impression I get is that he just wants more innovative and engaging schools filled with team-building exercises and projects, but he's not interested in figuring out how to reintegrate children into society, how to get them out of schools and into different places and situations with people, the way children are part of society throughout history before the factory model of schooling dominated our lives. I think a learning society, not a system of schools, should be our ultimate aim for the future. This is the big idea I play with. What would a learning society look like? Godin writes, as a citizen, I'm not sure I want to trust 100 million amateur teachers to do a world-class job of designing our future. Now, interestingly, he's not talking directly about homeschooling in that section, but it sure sounds like it. And when he does discuss homeschooling, he is very skeptical. It indicates a strong misunderstanding of the actual practice of homeschooling, akin to a recent dig I read that homeschooling is akin to home dentistry. Homeschoolers do help their children learn to brush and floss, but when there's a cavity, they go to the dentist. Likewise, homeschoolers do help their children learn basic arithmetic, reading, and writing, and when they find they're out of their league, they go to a teacher, a book, call someone, and so on. This is on-demand learning as it's actually happening in real life, and it's getting easier to do with technology. And most importantly, I think Godin misses the fact that homeschooling and life is full of stories of, for instance, non-musical parents whose children become professional musicians, parents who are not very literate in science, but whose children become scientists, and so on. His model of learning is not as broad and robust as it should be. And that's essentially what I wanted to say.
Okay, so I'm interested if anybody else would like to chime in here. I mean, I think the points Pat has made occurred to many of us in reading the book. Would anybody else on the panel or in the audience like to respond? And I'm going to give Lisa Cooley the, Lisa, you have the mic. Just turn your mic on.
Hi. I believe in homeschooling. I believe in unschooling. I got into this because I wanted to find a way to do unschooling at school. I know it's ridiculous, but I really believe in the concept. The thing is that in my area, we have a lot of poverty, and it's rural, isolated poverty, and you have the parents who can't wait to get their kids on the bus in the morning and go do what they do. And I'm not putting them down. I'm really not. They're not going to homeschool. They have no intention, and their kids are really suffering. Their kids may be being harmed the most by what's going on in public school. We had an expulsion hearing recently where, I mean, without telling you the details of it, this is a kid that should have been homeschooled. He was having a terrible time in school. We ended up not expelling him, but boy, I almost wanted to do that just so that it would make his parents make smart choices about what he should be doing. They're not able to. They're not the parents who I think have the biggest difficulties. They are just not able to. They don't want to, and they won't. So that's why, in my mind, we really do have to figure out a way to have kids become learners in the public institution. It's our responsibility to do that, well, that's it for that.
So the panel is clearly weighted, toward a homeschool and school model, and I think there's no, it would be no surprise that Lisa reached out to people in that arena. I'm curious from those of you in the chat if there are more traditional views, or if you would respond differently than Pat did in that circumstance, or Lisa. Let's go to Lisa Nalbone, and Lisa, let's give you a chance now to respond because you raised your hand, but also maybe call out one really important part of the book for you.
Thank you. I think what Lisa Cooley just said, I think it's absolutely vital to change the system because there are so many children who haven't won the parent award, and if we can get more unschooling practices so that we can encourage children to be interested in their own education even within the classroom, and I think that's really possible based on my classroom experience, and then given the unschool experience, I think the issue of the institutional change is also really important, and it's addressed slightly in the book, and like you said, I think you did do a good job of bringing up the corporate, kind of the corporate interests and the institution that's so difficult to change. Those are two really big issues, I think, that we have to find a way to deal with because people don't like to change. And even at K-12 and at higher ed, there's so much protection of people's jobs and how they've always done it. So I think there's a lot of fear on that level that is sometimes not as out front in terms of talking about. It's a barrier for doing maybe what's best for students at either K-12 or higher education. And if we can find, Dennis Litkey's The Big Picture Schools is a great model. If we can find ways to get children more connected with the community and other mentors, even if they're within the public school system, then that's going to benefit everyone, I think. So I don't know if I did what you wanted me to do.
Oh no, you're doing great. And I am intrigued by this question of what are the next steps. If this is a secondary narrative, if this is sort of a John Dewey, John Holt kind of more thoughtful narrative that will always be in the background, I think it's a very different approach than you take if you have a desire to have all schooling change. And it's hard for me to see all of schooling change. As it is, it's easier for me to see kind of small changes implemented locally, but is that enough? And let's go to Nikhil. Pat, I'm going to come back to you, but Nikhil hasn't had a chance to kind of do his passionate moment yet. So let's go to Nikhil, and while we do so, Nikhil, I'm going to bring up that website you asked me to bring up.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a really great discussion on schooling and homeschooling, but what I see a lot, like in the book, one of the main key aspects, if you look to it, Rebecca Chapman, literary editor of the journal The New Inquiry, was quoted as, "My whole life I've been doing everything everyone told me. I went to the right school, I got the right grades, I got the internships, and then I couldn't do it." I think this is a really important aspect of the book because I've noticed that in society we have this idea everybody has to get the highest grades. We have to strive to have sort of a quantitative advantage over everyone else. And what Seth says is that we're becoming more obedient, we're losing our creativity, and we're coming out of the system after 16 years, not knowing how to solve problems, not knowing how to think critically, and not knowing how to actually perform well in the real world. And then a second part that I'm really interested in, as many of you probably know about the Coney 2012 campaign, is in the book, Seth talks a lot about passion and kids having a purpose. And what I noticed that, whether I disagree or agree with the campaign, I've noticed that people and kids that are not necessarily ignorant about what's going on in the world got so attached to this movement. They've tried to organize screenings. They've tried to find some sort of way to bring awareness to this issue. And I've noticed that when kids have a passion for learning, then only then learning happens. And when they're motivated by something, then it happens. And we need to strive towards a model that really looks for students to take that advantage in education, have that role. Because, frankly, we have that lack of a student voice on this issue. And a lot of students have really great things to say. Adults are often reluctant to listen to them. And I really think this is an opportunity. This is a prime moment because we've tried to reform education plenty of times before, but we've never actually transformed this paradigm, this model. And we got to move away from this over 100-year idea that we need to prepare kids for factory, and we need to move to something much more grander, much more revolutionary. Because I always like to say, reform can't really do much. We have to have a revolution. We have to really change all the ideas on the table and put everything into question. Hello?
We can't hear you, Steve.
Oh, sorry. So I have three questions. One would be, aren't there still going to be some jobs that do require that kind of compliance mentality? The next would be, isn't there going to be a desire for organizations to actually promote that idea that those jobs are the most important, and those two sort of conflict with each other? And then the third is the one Lisa asked, which is, is it reasonable to think that every child can follow a passion, or do we need a more balanced message? How would you respond to that kind of general questioning?
Well, in terms of the compliance jobs, I mean, one of the things I always like to say is that we're seeing this entire middle ground where we saw a lot of these, where if you got out of college, or even if you just got out of high school, you would get an job and you would stick with that job for a long time. But now I think all these middle jobs are being offshored, automated, and digitized. So we're either shooting for jobs right out of high school, or we have to get some more advanced sort of skills and try to reach for more innovation and value-based. Because all these sort of compliance jobs, like the factory work, a lot of factories are moving to China and India, and we're seeing this entire shift in the economy. And we need to have those types of jobs, because there was a really great statistic, I don't have the exact number on hand, but there's people have to have an education that helps them for jobs that haven't been invented yet. And we need an education system that is future-proof, that teaches them skills and helps them adapt to what's going on in the world today.
Okay, thanks, Nikhil. Does anybody from the panel want to respond to that? Norman, you're in the audience and you've raised your hand. I'm going to give you the mic, assuming that you want to say something. If you do, just click on that talk button at the top left. And you could have been clapping or thought you were clapping and hit that mic button. Okay, so I think, Lisa, we're waiting for your passionate response. Would you like to give one?
You have to say which Lisa, since you have three of us.
I'm sorry, my internet slowed down, so I couldn't even get back on. But Lisa Nielsen. Sorry, Lisa Nielsen.
Okay, great. I felt like I had a couple passionate moments, so I wasn't sure if you were referring to me. But just something I have been bringing up in the chat section that I guess I want to bring some attention to is a lot of the issues that we're looking at do stem from the fact that we have now turned into test prep factories in the schools. And what I have an impassioned plea for people to please stand up and speak up and act up for the right of your children not to be brought into this test prep mania. You can opt your children out of tests. Yes, you will be threatened by all sorts of things, but what I believe is that parents and individual students own their learning, not the government. We need to take control of student learning from the government and give it back to the people. And I put in the chat I started a group in every state in how you can opt out of tests in your state. There are states where they are much more concerned about a student's data than about a student's health and well-being. I have stories of children who had to be hospitalized because of what school was trying to force them to do, and when they refused to take the test, the kids were kicked out of school. And I don't think you want your children in such dangerous environments if that is what's happening in your school. But in many states, there are ways to opt out. There is a group for every single state in Facebook, and I started a website which gives you the opt-out rules and procedures in every state. So that's my impassioned plea, to get the billion-dollar test-making industry out of education and take back your right to learn. And the other thing is teachers were paid to know how to be professional assessors. We do not need to pay testing companies billions of dollars to do the jobs that teachers were trained to do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. So, Nikhila, you must have dropped off. I've made you back a moderator. So let's go. Pat, you've been patiently waiting. Let's have you come back and address whatever it is you'd like to address. Then, Norman, if you've tested your mic, we'll let you try again.
I just wanted to go back to the point Lisa was making about parents who are incapable for whatever reason of homeschooling, and what about those kids? Because I think that it's thin gruel to say school is their only option. I know that that's what you have to operate with, but I think we really have to start thinking like we can't keep telling them to let them eat course credits. If this child needs a caring adult in their life who will sit down and play with them, or just read to them, or give them food, or go for a walk, and that we as a society would trust that we could create places like this and people who would staff such places or take such concern. That to me is educational, because when a child is secure, then they're open to learning. But if a child is not, it's just going to fall by the side. So food, shelter, emotional support, play, these are all key things for kids. And I would like us to figure out ways to make that happen, besides sort of this, well, you're in school now, the bell's rung, and oh, you're still crying. Well, maybe I could talk to the principal so you don't have to go in right now. I mean, we have to figure out more flexible structures to deal with exactly the issues that Lisa's talking about, because these are important. And I guess that's all I want to say on that. Oh, one last thing though. But the opposite of that, poor parenting, I'm involved in an extreme of parental involvement in education. I mean, we could probably find millions of reams of paper that say parental involvement in education is important. So my goodness, look how educators have reacted to parents getting involved in education through homeschooling. I think that we really need to calm down the rhetoric and accept that we're all in this together, and that all these children are important to us, and that we can come to a solution together. That we all have something of value to add to this conversation. That's it.
Pat, so Nikhil is saying that he's starting a learning revolution. You've watched a lot of people get passionate about learning for a long time. What advice do you give Nikhil at this moment? What advice do you give those who really care about making a bigger change?
I would say for young people getting started, that it's important to be clear what you're talking about, but also not to be scared of your passion. I think that it's a shame that a lot of people criticize the Occupy movement because they didn't have a leader and they didn't have an agenda and all this stuff. There are there are young adults who know that something is amiss, something's wrong, and they're just calling our attention to it. They will eventually figure it out. So just getting started in doing something and trusting your guts is I think, important. And obviously Nikhil has that power, and I think he'll share it with others. But I also think it's important not, to look at what happened in the 60s and 70s and to try to learn from that too. Demonizing the opposition, certainly authority figures like the police became pretty demonized. The phrase pigs came up a lot then. And that really played against the student revolutionaries. And so I would I would advise a more measured tone in dealing with the adversarial approach. But in a society like ours that divides everything into Democrats and Republicans and black and white, the adversarial approach seems to be the way we have to go. But I think that there could be a more civil way of doing it, and I hope that our young children will show us, because we haven't done a very good job of it.
Norman, I've given you mic privilege. If you've run the audio setup wizard, to turn your mic on, you click on the larger talk button, not the one with the red star, but the larger talk button.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, good. My name is Norman, and the very first thing we have to do, and we have it within our power to do, is simply abolish the classroom model. We don't have to have classrooms. We need learning spaces, and they can be anywhere. They don't have to be in a building with administrators and top-down rules and all of those kinds of things. And the most important thing we need to do is simply ask the students, what do you want to know? Everybody wants to know things to make their life better. And it's the responsibility of people in the class, in the learning space, I can't get rid of the vocabulary myself, to connect what they know about to what the students want to know. And if they don't want to know about what you know, they'll leave, and they should be able to. The only formal thing we have to do is teach people how to read, to decode the message, to decode the thoughts that we share with each other. And we have to end this idea that school is a selection process where everybody proceeds according to, and I don't know who said it the first time, date of manufacture, how old you are. It's how Karl Marx learned, it's how Albert Einstein learned, it's how Adam Smith learned, it's how Sam Adams learned. Great. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Destroy the classroom model, make school non-mandatory, and simply share what you know with people who want to know it.
Thanks,
all.
Norman.
Thank
so
you.
does anybody from the panel want to respond to that? And I'm particularly curious how you get from that kind of impassioned rhetoric to actual practice. Is it something that Norman should just do in his own local community, or are there lessons from Seth's book here about a larger shift in thinking? Anybody from the panel want to respond?
I'll just say. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
I'll just make a quick comment that I think that we're in a time today where social media is able to bring people together like never before, and the system thrived off of that. And based on what I was saying a little bit earlier, just in things like opting out, parents had no idea that they could even do it, and they didn't know other people wanted to do it. And we can use things like social media to bring like-minded people together that never would have known the other existed and actually take action. So I'll turn it back over to Nikhil.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, we've looked at all these. If you study a lot of these movements, for example, I've studied the Chilean student movement that's been going on for the past year, maybe year, and what they came together in terms of how they organized was that they had discussions. And I really think that when I start this learning revolution movement, is that we need to have wholehearted discussions between communities, and then we need to nail down specific demands. Because without demands, I think it cannot be effective. And just as Lisa was saying, we need the simple as an opt-out campaign. Yang Zhao, a really great education reformer, has said that if just 6% of parents opt out of their standardized testing in terms of regime, then the whole test data will become invalid, and they cannot use that to determine whether a school is failing or succeeding. And this is just something very simple. Any parent can do this. And we've seen great protests from change.org, and just starting from the internet. And we can branch off from this and reach a whole new type of people that are interested in the subject, because everyone has some sort of attachment to education. Whether you're a parent or whether you just finished out of the school system, you have some sort of idea of what needs to be done and your opinion on it. And we need to get those people that are disenfranchised out of the debate and put them back into the conversation.
Okay, so we're about to wrap up. I want to make sure that each of you place in the chat some way to get a hold of you. So either a website or an email address if you're comfortable with it, so that those who are listening can respond to you or continue the conversation. If you felt like the chat flew by tonight, and of course it did, you can go up to File, Save, and you can save the chat. And you can also do so when you play the recording back later. And so the chat is not lost to you. I hear somebody on the mic. Was that you, Nikhil? Did you want to say something more?
Well, I just given my email address, ngoyle2013@gmail, and just please email me. I mean, I really want to start a conversation with everyone on the table. I mean, it's so important. Thank you again.
So Nikhil, we still show you live in the session. If you're able to type that in, then people will be able to capture it. Maybe you did, and I haven't seen it yet. But
yeah,
and if
sure.
not, maybe Lisa can put it in for you. Terrific. This has been really fun. Of course, there's no way in an hour to cover everything, but I want to express appreciation to each of you for coming. Lisa, Pat, Nikhil, Lisa 2, and Lisa 3. Really a fascinating discussion. Obviously, lots more to talk about than can fit in an hour, but thank you for taking the time and for being here. I'm clapping for you, which I'm doing by hovering over the smiley face in the participant window and then going down to applause. I know it's hard to find. I apologize for that, but thank you for coming. Thanks to all of you who've attended and for being here. The recording will go up in a couple of days because I'm traveling and I actually have to be at my home computer to do that, but it will get up quickly. Any final words from anybody? Oh, I meant to show our slide and I didn't. This is from Lynn Kazali, who does this professionally, but it was a graphic recording of the book. And Lisa, why don't you put the link to your blog post in the chat so that people can find this? If I meant to bring it up and hold it up, but I didn't do so. Coming up again, Mimi Ito on the 12th, and then Kathy Davidson on the 20th. Kathy is quoted in the book, so should be a lot of fun. Thanks everybody for coming. Have a great evening. Most appreciated, especially to the panelists. Thanks for being here.